Hi, I'm Don Forsyth. I teach in the Jepson School of Leadership Studies. Each year the Leadership School puts together a series of presentations and performances. This year our topic is conflict and its resolution. We've had a number of people visit campus, but this is our final installment, and I am so happy to be joined today by Dar Williams. I'm not sure how to describe Dar Williams. It's very difficult. She's a unique individual. I could say she's a folk singer, a singer-songwriter, but she's also a teacher. Her songs are filled with wisdom and insight into how people get along, into our political systems. She teaches through her songs, and she'll be performing here later today on campus. But for now, we'll spend a few minutes talking with each other, sharing ideas. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
I'll start with just one simple question. So let's see, you have performed with both Pete Seeger and Ani DiFranco.
Mm-hmm.
How is that possible?
Well, Pete Seeger performed with Ani DiFranco.
Oh.
It's a once you're kind of in that group of people who, you know, travels, sings, writes songs, has to find a good breakfast, you know, in Ohio, that kind of crowd, you're in. You always have something you can talk about. And so the two of them, they're kind of ends of a spectrum. Pete is, you know, and I was teaching about music movements. I called him sort of the common man. He was the he was speaking the language of the common man. So you had the beat writers who were all mystical and stuff, and then you had Pete, who was the hardworking, temperate, you know, side-by-side person. Mm-hmm. And Ani, I think, took a lot from both the common Joe world and, you know, dresses and guy pants and does this, you know, is very folksy, but also kind of took some of that great mystical hippy-dippy stuff from the beats and put them together. But she's got a lot of Pete in her.
And so you blend in there somehow.
I'm in there somewhere too.
So if they're at the ends of the spectrums, you're somewhere, you're able to move along the entire spectrum in some ways.
Yeah, I think so. I think Ani and I, I'm probably more on the Pete side, just in the way I dress.
Wonderful. Many of your songs, how do I think of your songs? I think of your songs as, and I know you're visiting here for conflict, and to talk about conflict. And yes, you do have a lot of songs that talk about social issues, political conflicts, social conflicts and all, but you also have a lot of songs that talk about interpersonal conflict. You know, you speak about what pulls us apart, but also what pushes us together, which is so beautifully and so eloquent. So I'm a social psychologist, and so I study the connections in interpersonal relations between people. So I always find that your songs are very wise in that regard. You can take a relationship and look at the conflict that sometimes occurs in that relationship and talk about how people work it through and how it strengthens their relationships and resolves it.
That's what's very interesting to me. And actually, you know, a lot of people, when I was in college, they would do these David Mamet plays. And a lot of David Mamet plays are about how we can never trust each other, you know, the ways that we continue to betray each other. But I was always more interested in Tennessee Williams, who one of his quotations was, "Time betrays us and we betray each other." And it's sort of, it has to, you know, how do we deal with betraying ourselves? Mm-hmm. You know, how do we deal with knowing that we're flawed and that we are going to not meet up with our own expectations? Or how can, you know, for me the central drama is how we surpass our own expectations and we find bravery or resources that we didn't know we had, and we gain wisdom. So needless to say, I never directed a David Mamet play. I always directed Tennessee Williams scenes, and that is very interesting to me, and something that I feel like, you know, that there was a lot of music that described the social conflicts out on the street, And later on, I kind of feel like they gave the rest of us permission, with all of the great things that they created, you know, the feminist movement. The feminist movement, they gave us the stability of a world where women could move around with a lot more freedom. And so what does this woman choose to do? Well, I write about bars, and I write about being a woman, and I write about summer camps. I write about anything I want, because my energy isn't all just drawn to the conflict out on the streets. So I thank them for allowing me get into that more psychological territory. That's interesting.
And it is wonderful, and of course you say, well, you get to concentrate on a certain thing, but you're very diverse in your interests. I mean, you're so engaged.
Thank you.
It's, I just feel so lucky that we were able to get you even briefly to come visit us, because you do so much. You are the fully engaged activist. You're a professional singer-songwriter. You have a family. You have relationships to take. You just managed to do it all. So a couple of years ago, you covered the Pink Floyd song, Comfortably Numb. Took me a while to quite understand that, but I did see you gave an interview on that and explained what that meant to you, that it was how do you stay so active? How do you manage to stay, and for me it's just managing to stay alive to the world, to say every day, well, great, I'm here, it's wonderful, I'm still alive, and there's a beautiful sun shining. But you push it even beyond that. You stay alive to not just the world, but your social responsibilities in the world. So how do you do it year after year?
I just, this is a great gift of early, what happened early on in my career. I wrote the songs that I wanted to write because I wanted to write them. I wrote them, I put them out in the world on my own terms, and without a sense that I was pushing anybody away. I just, I went with the flow, and I do what I want to do, and what happens, and so my whole struggle is just to create the environment in which I want to do something. But when it feels like I'm pushing up against a hard surface, there's always something else. It's nice to have a few things on the fire, right? So that you can, if something's really not grabbing you, as my friend said, I'm working on a podcast right now, and she said, well, I know you're writing songs right now, so don't worry about the podcast unless you want to toggle back and forth between the songs and the podcast to keep yourself engaged. And I thought, I think I'm a toggler. I think I go back and forth.
Multitasking.
And it's actually what'll happen is I'll have maybe 4 things that I'm interested in, and if something isn't still holding me, because I think that you got to have that energy of interest in order for it to kind of count. I'll just toggle to the thing that is holding my interest, and then I'll go back, and hopefully within a day, something on my 4 checklists will be checked off of each list.
Oh, so you got a list.
Well,
you'd have to have a list. You do so much.
I do. I have to set the bar reasonably, though, and have that talk with myself about what's getting accomplished and not on that list, because you can get obsessed.
You seem to be taking on more things, so you're teaching more. I saw you visited West Point, and you've got summer programs on teaching songs that matter at the Omega Institute at Garrison. So those are, you're not just singing and performing and writing songs, and plus you have a new album coming out. The Emerald's coming out.
True. Thanks. Yep. It's all coming together, though. They feel related to me because they're all, especially, the album is self-produced, so that's, or produced with a bunch of my friends. So
that's
songs,
a new thing.
Right, and some of the songs are produced by my friends, and some I did with them. But, I've always been sort of hands-on, but the fun and the friendship and the travel are all things that I can bring to my songwriting retreats and talk to them, with empathy and companionship about how we write songs and how they're fun and how they're hard. And so, I brought all these new stories with me in my mind. I can now bring into those retreats, and we can all work together with our new gimmicks and our new ideas. And then teaching about music movements, I am going to do that again at Wesleyan in the fall. But it's really fun to show up on a campus and to speak from experience, even if the experience is kids saying, so Professor Williams, I assume that musicians sit around and play music all the time, and some of them do, but I said, actually, speaking from my experience, a lot of them just talk about airports and who crushes your guitar, who has the best,
How you managed to get here today.
Right. All the little tricks we have about, the best rental car agencies. I said, that's what we really talk about, and luggage. So it's fun to, and the meaning of life, So it's fun to come into the campus and kind of feel like a road warrior.
That's right, in restaurants, because I know you've written that book. You've gone to so many different places and couldn't get natural food that you wrote a book about it.
Well, early on, even before I was a full-time touring person, I went on the road with my boyfriend at the time, and it was, you'd go to a franchise here only to find out that around the corner was everything that not only had great food, but that held all your social beliefs. It was run by some couple who both had, long hair and both had these strong social beliefs about, food. And so I thought, why? Actually, it's not a restaurant guide, it's a natural food store guide, so that you could go to a place. And for me, it was really helpful, if for nothing else, for getting coffee. They have really good coffee. And they would also be that part of town that has like a drop-in yoga class or a chiropractor or something like that if you needed it. So it turned out to be a great resource for myself, and I think it really was. A lot of my friends used it. So we were supporting this alternative economy instead of the road dog business as usual thing.
Right.
That ended up helping me more than probably I helped the world.
Got it all organized.
Yeah.
I'm getting messages that we need to move along, but I've got to ask a selfish question. As a person who's been teaching for, say, 35 years, and so I go in to teach, and I'm starting to feel like sometimes it's a little stale. And when that happens, I think about, well, there's this Joni Mitchell quote on one. She's talking about how, she stopped for a while and just did art, and didn't do her music quite so much. And she said, because no one asks you to do your paintings again. I got to do the painting. It was done. I didn't have to talk about it. But here I am performing again the same song. So you will be on stage tonight, and who knows what you'll perform. I hope you do Christians and the Pagans, but you've done that a few times, I assume. But whenever I've seen you perform, it's fresh. It's like brand new. It's like, how do you do that? How do you bring that enthusiasm, that brand new excitement, given that you've probably done Christians and the Pagans 1,000 times?
Maybe. But you and I probably have a lot of, you should give yourself some credit. There are little things that you can do, like you can sense a person listening, So I always think about who's hearing it for the first time, and somehow that sort of gets my blood up to think of somebody, how they're hearing it, and that's a help. And there was one tour that I was on where everybody was bummed out. It was terrible. There was a techie who was a bully. There was somebody going through a big breakup, and I thought she was going to be my drinking buddy. And she said, no, I have to write in my journal and take long walks. I was like, no, you should drink, and so everybody was bumming. My son was with us. He was 2. He didn't like the babysitter, so he woke me up at 2 a.m. every night, and I was just not holding it together on stage, and I thought I would have to quit, because I literally was doing math in my head, just of what I needed to do, the gigs I needed to do to get through the year, and nothing would stick. That those little tricks we play at the beginning of a class or a concert, where you get yourself psyched up somehow, or you play a little trick of the mind to re-engage yourself. Nothing worked, and then, thank God, I went up to Canada, and 2 things happened. And I played at tiny places because I didn't have a following in the cities I was going to. And I heard a song by Kat Goldman called Weight of the World that I've actually finally recorded on this last album. And I just started to sob. So sometimes you're frozen So I just kind of needed to melt, and that helped, and it made me understand the power of a song and remember that that's important to people. And then I went to this other place that was a bar. It was just outside Ottawa. Everybody was really drunk. The walls were all steamed over. It was snowing outside. The audience was right here, and laughing and engaged, and I just felt it. You know, it's just a magic
But they had a
of
great time,
engagement.
probably.
And I just said, I'm back. I just needed to remember that we're all like that. It's energy, and it never, thank God, left me again after that the way it had. But there were 20 concerts where I said,
Oh my! 20.
if I could paint, I'd paint. Yeah, 20. It was 20. It was a tour. So I won't. You know, we're probably both like Joni. If you really don't feel it, you should probably leave the room.
Well, thank you so much. I think we're about out of time.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.